in this business, one of the first things that when I worked for someone else, my employer made me do was a personality test or a behavioral assessment. And it was a DISC profile. And I thought it was fantastic because I learned a lot about myself. Then we went into a conference and a training where I learned a lot about how do you apply other people's personality types, identifying them, and how do you use that to work for you in settings. So the DISC profile, and I'm not going to do it justice going over this in a 3-minute video, but it tends to be that people fall oftentimes into 4 different primary quadrants of how they operate and how they think and how they work. Most people tend to be a mix of all things. So keep that in mind. If you want to learn more on this, I highly encourage you to just Google DISC profile. You can take it. So in your groups, and even outside of the referrals group, we're looking at the 4 quadrants. Your Ds tend to be direct, they're results-oriented, they're very competitive. Your Is are like life of the party. They're enthusiastic, they're friendly, they're very optimistic. Sometimes Ds and Is clash a lot too. Cs, think engineers to a degree here, accurate, cautious. Your numbers really matter. How you work your processes and systems within your group really matter. And then your S's, always think like your grandma or your school teacher, but more so, they're just the most reliable people. You know, they're very steady, they're very sincere, they're patient, and they tend to be modest. They sometimes will be the most successful person in the room, and you just never would know it. So now I want to take the DISC profile and apply it to both prospective members and your own existing members within the group and how you run your own agenda. So your Ds, and a lot of salespeople and business owners, their predominant trait is a D. The numbers really matter to them. So if you run a meeting and, for example, Renee was just telling me about a group she was at this morning where they had 5 referrals on the board, but they really talked about 15. If a D is a guest and they're looking at the group, they're gone. They're not going to be interested in your group. The Is, on the other hand, you can have 0s on the board across the table, and if the group is really fun and engaging, they're going to love it. At the same time, they can have 50 referrals on the board, do everything perfectly, but if it's stuffy and rigid, they're gone. For your Cs, your numbers really matter as well to them. Also, accuracy of it, making sure tracking spinoffs, referrals from alumni, things like that. But really for your members within the group, those that are kind of a C predominantly, how you run each section of the agenda and the systems for follow-up that you have in place on referrals, given and received, timeliness, that stuff is really important to them. For guests that are in that road, how you run the meeting agenda, also how the numbers are reflected, truly are very important to them. For S's, whether they're a guest or a member, they truly care about how people feel about the other people in the room. So it's sincere conversations, but also not necessarily just sincere conversations. They want to see that the group cares for each other. They want to see the group that if the meeting starts at 8:30, no one's waiting in the parking lot to come in at the last minute. Everyone's rushing in. They're excited to see each other. They're asking genuine questions, caring about each other's business, but they're also rock solid typically on attendance, logging referrals, but also just showing up, doing face-to-face meetings, caring for each other. By the way, S's make fantastic education chairs within groups typically. So I know we hit this really quick, but let's recap from a recruiting and also more importantly, retention standpoint within your groups. I think for every group, it's really important to kind of operate almost where you're touching all 4 quadrants, kind of right here in the middle. Your numbers are accurate. The meetings are fun. People look forward to them. Conversations are sincere. People care about each other, but also everything's really accurate. We run the meeting and the program well. And if we look at our most successful groups, they tend to fall, if you had to pick a personality for their group, almost right in the middle. For our groups that struggle in some capacity, they're either too high of an I, too high of a D, too high of an S in some capacity typically. Rarely they're too much of a C, but it tends to fall in one of those 3 areas where we're a little off balance and we need to pull back towards the middle in one direction.